on March 9, 2026, Monsanto agreed to pay $7.25 billion to cancer victims who proved that Roundup caused their non-Hodgkin lymphoma. 4 days earlier, Republicans on the House Agriculture Committee had quietly voted 34-17 to slip a provision into the new farm bill that would shield pesticide companies from exactly those kinds of lawsuits. Over 100 organizations condemned it, but how this clause actually works reveals something far more alarming. In courtrooms across the country, juries have been delivering a message that even the world's largest chemical companies can't ignore. In 2025, a Georgia jury stunned the industry by ordering Bayer, Monsanto's parent company, to pay $2.1 billion to farmers who proved that exposure to Roundup's active ingredient, glyphosate, caused their non-Hodgkin lymphoma. That verdict was just one in a cascade of losses for pesticide makers, with similar cases piling up from California to the Midwest. By early 2026, the legal tide had become a flood. On March 9th, Monsanto agreed to a national settlement of $7.25 billion, one of the largest payouts for a product liability case in U.S. history. The deal was meant to resolve nearly 200,000 claims from people who said their cancer was caused by Roundup, and it capped years of bitter litigation that had exposed the company's internal knowledge of glyphosate's risks. But even as Bayer tried to buy legal peace, the threat wasn't over. More than 65,000 lawsuits remained active, and the Supreme Court was preparing to weigh in on whether federal pesticide law could block future claims. The courtroom victories had sent a clear signal. Juries were no longer willing to accept corporate reassurances or the EPA approval as proof of safety. For farmers and families, these verdicts were about more than money. They were about holding powerful companies accountable for the consequences of their products. The scale of the settlement and the string of verdicts rattled the pesticide industry. With billions in potential liability still looming, chemical companies and their allies in Congress began searching for a way to shut down these lawsuits for good. The stakes had never been higher, not just for corporations facing massive payouts, but for the thousands of people whose only chance at justice depended on the right to take their claims to court. On March 5th, 2026, the House Agriculture Committee cast a 34-17 vote that would quietly reshape the rules for pesticide makers. Hidden among the Farm Bill's dense pages, a provision granted manufacturers broad immunity from lawsuits, so long as their products displayed EPA-approved labels. The language, crafted in private, stripped states and local governments of the power to impose stricter health warnings or restrictions than federal law allowed. This maneuver came on the heels of Monsanto's settlement of $7.25 billion, with nearly 200,000 plaintiffs who linked Roundup to non-Hodgkin lymphoma. After a $2.1 billion Georgia verdict and mounting legal losses, chemical companies faced a tidal wave of litigation. The committee's decision offered them a shield, inserted under the banner of regulatory consistency. The backlash was immediate. Over 100 environmental, health, and consumer organizations issued a joint letter denouncing the provision as a grotesque giveaway to the chemical industry, warning it would endanger public health and undermine the Farm Bill's credibility. Their statement argued the clause would tie the hands of local officials, even in the face of new evidence or emerging risks. Representative Chelly Pingree led the charge to strip the immunity language, arguing it endangered human health by insulating industry from accountability. Her amendment failed along party lines. Representative John Rose countered that agriculture depended on a single national standard for crop protection. Rebecca Wolf of Food and Water Watch called the move a clear handout to industry. The Center for Biological Diversity warned it would let chemical giants block cancer victims from suing and override wildlife protections. As the bill advanced, the stakes for public health and local democracy only grew. Sections 10,205 through 10,207 of the 2026 Farm Bill operate as a legal firewall for pesticide manufacturers. The text is precise. If a pesticide label carries the Environmental Protection Agency approval, that label becomes a shield against lawsuits, no matter what new science or state-level evidence might surface. Any state or local law that tries to require stronger health warnings, restrict pesticide use, or demand extra disclosures is simply overridden. In legal terms, this is federal preemption, Congress telling every county, city, and state that their authority stops where the EPA label begins. The mechanism is stark. Section 10,205 bars. Any state or local law that imposes labeling stricter than the Environmental Protection Agency requires. Section 10,206 gives manufacturers a complete defense to failure to warn lawsuits, so long as their product label matches what the EPA approved. Section 10,207 stretches even further, blocking states from using environmental laws like the Clean Water Act or the Endangered Species Act to challenge pesticides once they are federally registered. For decades, states have acted as the last line of defense when federal agencies lag behind the science. When the Environmental Protection Agency delayed warnings about organophosphates' neurotoxicity, California and New York stepped in. When glyphosate cancer risk was debated, local governments demanded buffer zones and stricter rules. The Farm Bill wipes that slate clean. The National Association of Counties, representing both Republican and Democratic officials, warned that these sections would effectively eliminate county authority to regulate pesticide labeling and use, undermining local public health protections. Their statement frames the provision as a bipartisan threat, not just a partisan maneuver. In practice, chemical companies need only satisfy the Environmental Protection Agency process to gain sweeping immunity. Even if new studies show harm, or if local communities want stronger safeguards, the federal label rules all. The legal landscape shifts overnight. Juries are sidelined, state courts locked out, and the EPA, an agency with a history of slow or incomplete warnings, becomes the sole gatekeeper for public health. On March 1st, 2026, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. became Secretary of Health and Human Services, vowing to bring chemical accountability to Washington. His Make America Healthy Again agenda promised to take on toxic chemicals and hold polluters responsible, a pledge that drew support from conservatives and independents frustrated by government inaction. For Kennedy's followers, the fight against glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup, was personal. They expected real change. Yet as Kennedy took office, more than 65,000 lawsuits against Bayer over Roundup's alleged link to non-Hodgkin lymphoma remained unresolved. Each case represented a worker or farmer who believed years of exposure had cost them their health. Days after his swearing in, a $7.25 billion settlement was announced, but tens of thousands of plaintiffs remained outside its terms, still waiting for justice. Meanwhile, House Republicans pushed a farm bill granting pesticide companies broad immunity from lawsuits if their labels matched EPA standards. For supporters of Make America Healthy Again, this move felt like a sharp reversal, proof that industry influence could still override promises of reform. Inside the House Agriculture Committee, the battle lines were unmistakable. Representative Chellie Pingree stood, amendment in hand, determined to strip the pesticide immunity clause from the Farm Bill. She warned her colleagues, "We know there are health risks out there, and this immunity clause is extremely dangerous to human health because it shields industry from accountability." Her words echoed the frustration of cancer victims and families who had watched jury after jury side with plaintiffs against Monsanto and Bayer. Pingree's amendment called for preserving the ability of states and local governments to protect residents when federal agencies fell short. On the other side, Representative John Rose responded with a defense that echoed industry talking points. He insisted that modern agriculture depends on glyphosate, to feed a growing nation, and without it, we would lose productivity and food security. Rose argued that a patchwork of state regulations would paralyze farmers and drive up costs, framing the immunity provision as a safeguard for the nation's food supply. The vote was swift and decisive. Every Republican on the committee lined up against Pingree's amendment, joined by 7 Democrats, defeating it along party lines. The immunity language survived. What started as a plea for local control and public health ended in a legislative defeat, as the bill advanced with the shield for pesticide companies intact. Rebecca Wolf of Food and Water Watch didn't mince words. She called the farm bill's pesticide immunity language a clear handout to industry, warning that chemical companies, desperate and losing in court, had turned to their cronies in Congress for protection. The Center for Biological Diversity went further, blasting the provision as a grotesque giveaway to the pesticide industry. Their statement argued the bill would free Big Ag to accelerate the use of dangerous poisons, block cancer victims from suing, and hand industry a veto over wildlife safeguards. More than 100 advocacy groups echoed these warnings, flooding lawmakers with letters and public statements. The clock is running. Representative Angie Craig, a Democrat from Minnesota, cautioned that poison pills like the immunity rider could derail the entire farm bill, which must pass before the current extension expires on September 30th, 2026. With industry lobbyists swarming Capitol Hill and farm groups split over the direction of the bill, the stakes are clear. If the immunity provision survives, future Roundup-style lawsuits could be wiped out, leaving families, farmers, and local governments powerless. The coming months will reveal whether Congress stands with public health or with the companies they are supposed to regulate. Tonight, 65,000 cancer lawsuits hang in the balance, as Congress weighs letting chemical giants erase local safeguards and legal accountability with a single vote. Immunity isn't safety. When public health collides with corporate influence, who protects us? The stakes for every community, every family, have never been clearer. Share your thoughts below.